afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this special interview session with the Director General of the Development Agenda for Western Nigeria Commission, the Don Commission. I wouldn't know if I should call him a chief or maybe a minister would do, is Mr. Seye Oyeleye, courtesy of Voice of Reason. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
It's good having you. On the program this afternoon, we'll be looking at the Southwest in the past, what it is today, and what it should be in the future. And so that makes my guest on the program this afternoon timely and appropriate for this particular topic. Was there an agenda for the Southwest region before independence?
Yeah, well, once again, good afternoon. Clearly, there was an agenda. Nigeria got its independence 1960, but you will realize that regions started having what they called self-government 8 years prior, as early as 1952, 53. The regions were operating on what you could call semi-independence. So we all know of the government of the late Sage, Chief Seye Oyeleye, during the Action Group era. You could safely say that that was the government that set an agenda for what was then known as Western Nigeria. I mean, prior to 1950s, you could say that it was a region, or we were a people in a state of flux. But by the time Chief Seye Oyeleye and his crew assumed governance of the region, they set that agenda. And it's that agenda that they set that today, 70 years later, it is still the reference point for development for us in the region and the country as a whole. So you could safely say that they were futuristic 70 years ago when they were planning. And so there was an agenda, there was a deliberate purpose to what they were doing.
Can we point out what this agenda was? What was it that the Sage and every other person at that time set out to achieve, especially for the Yoruba nation?
The major thing, which was the foundation for our development, was education. The late Sage and his crew, they knew that without education, there can be no development. And as I said, prior to 1950, 51, we were more or less in a state of flux. We had educated people in the region. It wasn't that we were stark illiterates, because as early as the 1870s, 1860s, we were already producing doctors and lawyers. But by the time the Egbe Omo Odua started planning, and then they metamorphosed, they brought into Action Group, it was clear that for them to achieve the development that they desired, there had to be mass education. So what the government did then was to focus on making sure that the mass got education to a certain level. When you talk of the mass, so it was no longer the children of the rich or the privileged who had access to education. The policy or the agenda was, let everybody, every young person must have access to education, because once they have access to education, development will be faster. And that was what gave birth to free education in 1955, where, and don't forget that he was fiercely resistant even to start the free education, because people might have thought that, free education was going to be widely accepted. He lost provincial elections because he introduced free education and a bit of taxation to fund that free education. Because when we say free education, you have to understand that somebody else was paying for it. So the agenda then was educate the masses. Once they have a level of education, every other thing, maybe infrastructure, agri development, everything will fall in place. But the first thing is educate. Once you have educated minds, you grow. So that was the initial agenda, and that was the underpinning template for every other thing that happened in Western region.
The region, can we say today that the Southwest region still boasts of the most educated set of people in Nigeria today?
You see, it's a matter of perspectives and conjecture, really. When you're talking of the most educated, yes, we have an enlightened population. You see, education, it does not necessarily mean you've been to the four walls of a school or four walls of a classroom. Because of the template set 70 years ago in free education, it titrated down to everybody. So even that mama that didn't go to school was exposed to children who had been to school, if you get my point. So it is not unusual today to go to Ojabudija and meet a mama who has not been to the four walls, or who have not seen the four walls of a classroom, but will be able to converse with you, be able to do simple arithmetic, all because of the exposure to education through a third or second party. So all I'm saying is that if you are saying that we have an enlightened population, yes. If you want to equate that to educated population in large numbers, yes. So you can't term us or term the region as an illiterate region. No. What was started 70 years ago, we're still having the effect today. So whether you now call us the most educated or, well, it's up to the purists for them to start rating.
Okay.
Yeah, because if I say that, yes, the region is the most educated, where's my data for saying that? As an example, our brothers in the north might decide that that's not true, that they have more educated people than us. You don't have the data to argue with that, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's talk about commerce, then we look at agriculture. Was the Southwest region before independence known for commercial activities, or it was one that was conceded to our brothers from the eastern part of the country?
Well, it is what it is, really. You see, we have been exposed to, and I'm talking of the Yoruba, the western region itself. I mean, there was no Nigeria until 1914. But before Nigeria existed in these formats, we have been exposed in this part of the world to European traders and traders from the Middle East. So you find out that the Madame Tinubus of this world, they had been trading with the Europeans for years. Development in Egbaland, as an example, Egbaland had been thoroughly developed well before we had Nigeria as a country. That's why they were able to send their sons and daughters abroad to study. That one happened before Nigeria. All because of the exposure they have had. We've been trading with the Europeans for over 200 years, well before Nigeria came into existence. The average Yoruba man or woman is known for business. They grew up as businessmen and women. They traveled the length and breadth of what we call West Africa today to trade. They traveled as far as Senegal in those days to trade. Some of our fathers went as far as today's Middle East, as traders, hundreds of years before we had Nigeria. That has been our culture over the years, accommodating. We welcome all comers into this area of the world. And that was one of the reasons why, and that's one of the reasons why people say that today, you find out that if you're talking of urbanized settlements, Western Nigeria has the highest number of urbanized settlements. It's as a result of our historical antecedents in the areas of commerce. In the real sense of it, where if you go to other parts of this country, you find villages, hamlets. In the real sense of it, we don't have villages anymore here because over the years, we become totally urbanized as traders, as people who are exposed to the other parts of the world. Now, today, you might then down, even bringing it down to the 50s, the 60s, some 70s, some of the biggest industries were owned by the Yorubas of Western Nigeria. So you find the Isoglass of this world, the Odutolas of this world. You understand my point? The Oni and Sons, the Ajadi and Sons. Those were big businesses. Along the way, there's been a slip, as in SLIP. And maybe our focus changed. Maybe you see, when you are at the top, you must continue to design measures and programs to ensure that you stay at that top. Because you don't have a permanent right to stay at the top. I think that maybe at some point, and I'm saying this guardedly, I think at some point we took our eyes off the ball as a region. So we are an accommodating lot. A lot of people came in, they started mixing with us, doing a lot of business. And today, whether rightly or wrongly or statistically, we start seeing a group, another part of the country, as, oh, they are the industrious ones, they are the business ones. But you ask yourself that we were industrialists, not just traders. You understand my point? Mm-hmm. And there's a difference between an industrialist and a trader. But of course, in today's world, traders tend to do a lot now. The world has become a global village. So the era of having mega industries is long gone. So if you are manufacturing cars as an example, Mr. A will be doing the headlamps, another person will be doing the seats. You bring everything and you have your car. All I'm just trying to say in essence is, it's not that we've lost our zeal, but I think the nomenclature of the way we engage has changed.
Okay, so is it a weakness on the part of the Yorubas that they are accommodating? You've traced the history, okay? And it appears that's the real thing now. It appears the Yorubas have conceded trade and maybe a sense of industry to a particular group of people. Are you saying that being accommodating as one of the features of the Yorubas, I mean, one of the innate, I don't want to call it, how do I put it, one of the things they are endowed with, is it working against them? So that, as Yoruba would say, have they given their, cock to the end or something?
You see, it's a difficult one because I said earlier that the world is now a global village. Nobody exists in a silo. In fact, environments that try to exist in a silo, they tend to go into extinction eventually. So it is a plus for Western region that we remain an accommodating space for people to come in and thrive, for people to come in, put their stall down, and make money. It is a plus. For those of us that we are here, that we call ourselves in quotes, that we are the owners of the land, it is then up to us to up our own game, to ensure that those that we invited to come and share space with us do not suddenly become the landlords of that space. And if you look at, let's take the example of our brothers from the southeast, our Igbo brothers, the way they do their own commerce. It's more of what you can call collectives, where they pool resources together to do business. It is a model that even it is being studied in business schools all over the world. As Yoruba people, over the last 40 years, I said in that period, we slipped because maybe we were too late in adapting to the changing world. So we remained as the industrialists. And if you want to be an industrialist, you need mega millions. To be a trader, you can start small. So maybe we took our eyes off the ball and we allowed a group of people to take over that trading space, thinking that, okay, we'll remain as industrialists. But as I said, the world has changed. So, in essence, all I'm just trying to say is that it's up to us to change that narrative by being deliberate in the way we approach business going forward. This is our space. One thing we must not do is sit in one corner and cry that, oh, our land has been taken over. We no longer have the economic power. No. What are you doing to ensure that you get back into that economic space? We have a lot of youth here. There has to be measures, deliberate measures, that we can put in place to encourage our young ones to embrace commerce all over again.
But is it possible for you to hold on to political power and economic power at the same time?
Yeah, well, they are not mutually exclusive. They're not. There's no reason why you can't control both political and economic. Let me give you an example. I'll use UK. You're taking as an example, and it's an odd example. The Asians in UK, the influx of Asians has been for years, but the real influx started when the late Idi Amin Dada in Uganda sent out all the Asians in 1971-72 and sent them to UK. Well, sent them, UK absorbed all of them. Now, in that 50-year period, they knuckled down, they started with commerce, sent all their children to the best schools. So they owned the commerce area very well
In the
in the United Kingdom. So the next thing they are now doing is aspiring for political power. That's why you have their son, who is the front runner, trying to become the prime minister of Britain. If you look at some of the big mayors in UK, they are Asians. The mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is an Asian. If you go down to, I think it's in Burnley, the mayor there is an Asian. They finished occupying the commerce, and they're now aspiring for political power. Don't forget, if you aspire only for political power, you don't have commerce. You're just going to be a titular head, because it's only the commerce that will control or determine.
Is that fate befalling the Southwest already?
No, I won't say that. I won't say that. I won't say that fate is befalling. That would be too dramatic. But we must not go to bed with two eyes closed. We must particularly, and I'm saying this again, particularly design policies and measures that will empower our younger ones to embrace commerce and at the same time ensure, monitor that they thrive. There is no point in saying, oh, I've provided this enabling environment if you don't have the financial muscle. That's financial lifting must start from the deliberate policies of Western Nigerian governments to ensure that that space called commerce, we don't abdicate it permanently.
I raised that question because it appears the Southwest, politically sophisticated, no doubt about it, but it appears the Southwest is now much more interested in political power. It's as if the Yorubas are in rivalry with the North, over political power.
You see, it's when you're talking of political power, it's I won't say for the lack of nothing else to do. We tended to start seeing politics as a job, as a career. If you go out there today, you find a lot of the young ones from the Southeast into a lot of businesses because they have the financial ones to do it. It's not that they are not interested in politics, but their primary constituency, their primary role is commerce, and they're doing it well. Our young ones, who you think all they're talking about is politics. Sadly, some of them are only following politicians because they have nothing else to do. So they know that if they follow a politician, crumbs will pass down to them. It doesn't augur well for our development. It doesn't. And we don't need to hide about that. So that's why I kept saying that the notion that, we've left commerce and what we are facing is politics is not true. A lot of our young ones there are so many people who are detached from politics. All they want to do is get on with their lives and affect their environment in a different way. We can't all do politics. But if that opportunity is not there, for someone who has been to university, graduated, he has business ideas, but he can't even muster 10,000 naira. How will that business ideas come to fruition? It is the duty. That's why I kept saying deliberate. There has to be a bit of deliberateness on the part of Western Nigerian governments to ensure that a lot of our younger, because if you're talking of one of the most creative minds of this period, you find them here in Southwest. Look at what we are doing in the tech industry. I mean, I can safely say that this region, and a lot of our own children are there. This region is the #1 tech region in West Africa today. #1
West Africa.
Yes, I would say West Africa. I don't want to be too blasé and just say in Africa. But at least in West Africa, this is #1 tech region. A lot of our boys are doing several things in tech. And it's because some of them had that lifting, applying their skills. So our governments need to do more in empowering those young ones to come back into that space called commerce. We cannot afford, because if you don't have money, those that have the money will determine who the political leaders are eventually.
So you will advise anyone who has interest in politics to perhaps gain economic power?
Oh yeah, you see, politics should not be. It's one of the reasons we've had challenges in this part of the world is that there's so many people who don't have a second income. Politics is the only income they have. You see, the moment you make politics your only source of livelihood, it then becomes a do or die affair. A do or die affair. But assuming you are into politics and you don't win an election or you didn't make an headway, you have your second office that you can get back to. It is not happening at the moment, particularly among our young ones. That's why any ideology, any fad that comes on, they follow. Because There's no focus. And you see, it's only when you are economically empowered that you can have focus. And hungry men that cannot boast of 5,000 naira will have a die focus or a die vision, which we call division. Die is two, DI. So if man A turns up and says, "Follow me, I will give you 100,000."
It goes with you.
You go. On the way, man B turns up and says, "Don't go, I'll give you 300,000." He switches. Doesn't have. He's not empowered.
Times there were in this region, I mean the southwest region, we just as you have mentioned earlier on, the southwest region used to have notable industries. What killed these industries? I don't want to mention names. What to you killed these industries?
Well, as I said, the world changed. And for some, they were too late in innovating. They were too late in catching up with the changes. Then, obviously, for some of us who can remember, we had some strange economic policies in the mid-80s. SAP, Structural Adjustment Program, under the government of President Ibrahim Babangida of those days. With that SAP program, what it meant was suddenly to even manufacture your shoe at home was becoming less attractive because it was cheaper to import from China. So because our policies, we were not as futuristic as the Awolowos and the Aketolas of this world. What suddenly happened was that we had governments who came in and they were so short-term. They took decisions, they took permanent decisions based on the temporary situation they were facing. And nobody does that. So when Babangida brought in SAP in 1985, there could have been, in fact, I remember we were young then, but I remember there were different debates of how to go about restructuring the economy of the country. But they looked for the easiest option, and that easiest option meant we started killing our local industries. So it became it became more or less uneconomical to manufacture at home or to produce at home, and cheaper. So if it was costing me 20 naira to produce a shoe at home, and I can bring it in at 9 naira and sell at 17 naira, why should I manufacture?
I've been talking to the Director General of the Development Agenda for Western Nigeria Commission, the Dawn Commission. It's been an interesting time with you. Thank you so much.